Yay!
Good evening and welcome to All the Things. I am Monique Duson.
And I am Krista Bontrager.
This is the show where we talk about all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. Thank you for joining us tonight.
And helping us on the show tonight and every day is the one and only Bob Bontrager. There he is. Woo! All right, professional button pusher.
Now, tonight's show is a pre-recorded show, and so we do have moderators. I'm just not sure who they're going to be yet.
It's in the future.
Yes. So treat our moderators nicely. Thanks.
That's right. So we are pre-recording because we're out of town.
Yes.
And we're going to be speaking at a conference in Hawaii.
Yes.
And we're a little excited.
Suffering for the gospel, people. The suffering that I experience.
But we didn't want to leave you without some fresh content. And this is a conversation I've been wanting to have for quite some time. So I'm super excited for our guest tonight. And like Monique said, we will have moderators on the stream during the premiere. So go ahead and add your voice there. And also don't forget to interact with us, support the show, like, subscribe, make sure the notification bell is turned on.
Yes. In addition to that, our show tonight is brought to you by Impact 360, Birmingham Theological Seminary, the Center for Biblical Unity,
Theology Mom Podcast,
and Family 210 Clothing.
Woohoo!
Yes. All right. So tonight's topic, we're going to jump right into.
No, we got to do the what's happening, because there's a very obvious thing happening here. We cannot jump into the topic yet.
This is my life, people. Every day.
It's so different.
What?
You came back from Tennessee and I hardly recognize you.
Well, no. Okay. So I came back from Tennessee and I was
totally new hairdo.
No, when I came back from Tennessee, I was looking rough. People, it was rough. I relaxed. I rode a lot in Tennessee, but y'all, I came back. My hair was a mess. And so I went and I got it done again. Yes. Now see.
It looks really nice.
Thank you.
Everybody vote in the chat what you think of Monique's new hairstyle. Do you like the long? It has certain vibes to me of another prominent Black evangelical
I'm going to need you to
speaker.
Calm down all the way. He keeps telling me, you know what, I'm not even going to say
I know, I'm not saying it.
Either way, people.
Let's see who says it in the chat.
Either way. Yes. Because you know what? I can switch it up. It'll be like this for a month and then it's going to be something else.
I know, but I really like it.
Thanks.
I think she did a good selection. You had a little help picking it out. I like it.
Yes.
Because you almost have like the CFBU colors in there and everything. It's so cool.
God bless your spirit. God bless
I touched your hair. Oops. I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we are. Okay. Now, can we start?
All right. We can start. You got the book done, right?
Girl.
We're close.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I got so much done.
Yeah.
But I am glad to be back. And we are going to start officially right now.
Okay.
So for the last almost year, I feel like you've been wanting to talk about AI, which is artificial intelligence. I know nothing about AI or artificial intelligence. When I say I am representing the normal, just the average Joe, I am that person. All right. And so I'm going to sit and learn a lot too as we have this conversation. I'm really excited about it.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was so interesting. Elon Musk, the now owner of Twitter and Tesla, and I don't know, all his companies. He's got a lot of money and a lot of inventions. This is a tweet from March 29th. It says, breaking, a petition is circulating to pause all major AI developments, such as no more ChatGPT upgrades and many others. So one of the signers is Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, who was one of the co-creators of the Macintosh computer, Stability, I have no idea what that is, Stability AI CEO, and thousands of other tech leaders. Here's the breakdown. So this caught my attention because I have been concerned for a while about artificial intelligence and some of the things I see happening. And so we have a couple of friends on the show. Luckily, I know some people.
You do.
And so we have a couple of good people to talk to about this topic and get a Christian perspective on it. So I want to welcome to the show for the first time Dr. Jeff Zweerink from Reasons to Believe, and then whoop, whoop. Dr. Joe Miller. I don't know, he's been on 45 times. He's also on our Academic Advisory Council. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Good to be here.
Time to be here, Monique and Krista. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great to have both of you here. So, Jeff, you might be a little newer for most of our viewers. So maybe you could give us kind of your 2-minute introduction of who you are and how you became interested in researching the issue of artificial intelligence.
So as you mentioned, my name's Jeff Zweerink. I work at Reasons to Believe. I'm a senior research scholar there, just looking at developing resources that show how science and the Christian faith work together. And as I had been just in my scientific studies and looking at what's going on in the world, there's just a lot of computer stuff involved in that. I like doing computer programming and looking at how artificial intelligence is kind of making big inroads into things that are utilized in society. And so I thought, hey, that would be something interesting to just delve in. What is AI? How does it work? What, as a Christian, what does the Christian have to bring to that conversation? And so I've just been thinking about and started writing a manuscript, trying to get some information out there to help Christians and non-Christians alike, not only think about what is AI about, but why we want Christianity to be true if we're going to develop AI.
Wow, thanks so much for that, Jeff. Now, I have met Jeff a couple of times visiting you at Reasons to Believe. Yep. And so it's quite interesting and fun to have him on the show.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, for the 3 people who are watching that do not know who you are, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you became interested in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, well, it's good to be back on. And I'm sure there's more than 3 because you guys have, 1 million new followers every day or something like that. So
yeah, no shadow banning. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, it's exciting to be back with you gals again. So right now, I teach at Grand Canyon University. I'm assistant professor of Christian worldview, and excited. I get about 300 students a semester. I get 15 weeks to share with them about Jesus and the gospel every week. So it's pretty exciting. And my interest in AI is sort of tangential to my exploration of human origins. When I started doing some of my studies years ago, between science and religion and human origins for both my master's and PhD stuff, a lot of it was around Adam and Eve, which got us, what does it mean to be a human? And so when you start asking questions, what does it mean to be a human? You end up with all these questions of like, today, what does it mean? And so AI sort of touches on that question of what does it mean to be human as we explore, can AI, have human consciousness? Can it have identity? All those sort of things. So they ended up touching, and because I like the sciencey side of stuff, I started reading on it. So that's my interest.
Very cool. So what I love about this is the interdisciplinary nature of the conversation. Jeff's bringing a lot of his scientific background, computer programming, all of that. Joe's bringing, his background in ethics, philosophy, theology. So I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Where they all merge.
Yeah.
It'd
be great.
Now, for the regular people like me, remember, I represent the regular folk. Can you guys help me understand exactly what is artificial intelligence or AI? Where would I see it in real life?
Like, what would qualify something as an AI technology?
That to me is.
Hey Jeff, let me jump in. I'm gonna give you a quick definition first because mine's probably not as great as yours. So I'm gonna start weak, and then the bar will be set low, and you can go higher for everybody. So I'll look only bet worse if I go after you. So let me give you this quote. This isn't my definition, but I'm gonna give it to you because I like this definition. I'll tell you why in a second. AI, or artificial intelligence, refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to perform tasks that typically require human-like cognitive abilities, such as learning, problem solving, perception, and decision making. The ultimate goal of AI is to create intelligent machines that can perform complex tasks autonomously without human intervention and potentially even surpass human intelligence in some areas. Thus says ChatGPT. So I got that definition from ChatGPT.
You got a definition for artificial intelligence from artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be fun.
All right. That's good.
That's pretty cool. I actually like that. I struggle because when you ask for a definition of artificial intelligence, I think we need to have a definition of what intelligence is. But in my mind, there are kind of two categories that are relevant to think about. And when I think of artificial intelligence, my immediate thought is R2D2, Ultron, Hal, Johnny Five, Centennial Man. These are these sentient beings that, if you will, that they're robots, they're androids, they're something that are not biological organisms that somehow develop a consciousness, a sentience. They can learn, they can interact with other people, they grow, they mature. That would be the kind of the historical definition of artificial intelligence, where it's basically you've got this other being that we've somehow manufactured that's not biologically tied. But there's this other kind of more practical definition that is relevant to what we're using today, which is a computer system that is able to adapt and update itself. And a lot of people like to use the term learn, and I don't use that term because that's a very human way of thinking about it. But where a computer system that can, in an environment, make a decision, get input of whether the decision was good or bad, and then update itself so that the next time it's in a similar environment, it might make a different decision. So it's not just this, whatever comes in dictates the exact same thing out. It can kind of mature, if you will, in its response, or at least update its response to be more relevant to the current situation. And we've got examples of that kind of AI that exist in so many different arenas that we interact with.
So again, normal person question here. Are you talking about like a Roomba vacuum cleaner, or like when I get in my car and it's set on person one, so then I sit down and it knows to seat for me and adjusts for me, and then Krista gets in and it adjusts for her? Or are you talking about like when I look at my iPhone and it unlocks? Or you said the R2D2 from
Star Wars.
So like an actual robot. Like, are we headed toward like robot town? Help me out.
I think there's a lot of people who want that. The reality of it is the car that adjusts to your settings, that's just a program. It gets in, it detects that, and it adjusts to the settings. What I'm talking about that would classify as AI was where maybe like you're using a map or a navigation system where you say, hey, I want to go here. And it can navigate the terrain, figure out what different routes, and evaluate and say, this one's the best based on whatever its criteria. And it'll update itself if the traffic's worse or if there's a crash or things like that.
So when I use Waze...
Oh, I'm about to delete Waze. The devil is a whole lie. He ain't going to be knowing me like that.
So if I use Waze, I'm using artificial intelligence.
A level of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Probably the biggest place where you interact with it, though, is actually in your social media, because the whole backbone of social media is, how do I learn what this person's about? And then I can give them the content that they want to hear. And the better profile it can build, the more it can provide content that you're going to want to engage with. So there's a lot of AI behind the social media that we do. That's probably the most prevalent example that most people interact with.
So this is why when I click on Instagram and I watch an ad for face cream.
You are not watching ads for face cream. You do not even have to lie. She is watching corgi videos. Everybody want to know what she see on Instagram? It's only corgi video, face cream. Please.
And then I go on Facebook and it's
those same corgis.
It's those same face cream ads. It knows. And then I'm over on Google and it says, hey, do you want to know about this face cream? Would that be AI? Is that what you're talking about?
Those are the sorts of things that play out in doing that. So it is learning, hey, Krista is interested in this. So the next time it comes around, let's show Krista this. Maybe she'll engage with this more. You can look at corgi videos. I spent a lot of time looking at Kansas City Chiefs playoff pictures because I like football more than corgis, if you will. But yeah, that's what the AI is doing. It's learning, quote unquote, learning or updating itself based on your choices so that it can provide you something new in the future that hopefully engages you.
Now, I do have another question. Joe, you mentioned Chat GPT or
GPT chat.
Oh, GPT. What is that?
Yeah. So ChatGPT is this whole new. It's been around. It's basically a way of when you type in a question or ask Siri or Google, hey Google, do this, whatever, and it'll give you a response. It'll give you a reaction, right?
And that would be AI too, right? When you ask,
yes.
Hey Siri, play this song, or Hey Google, yes. What's the best place to eat around here or something? That's AI. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So ChatGPT is sort of a text form right now of that. We can go in and type in questions and it'll give you answers. So ChatGPT, think about a simple example is, when you type in your phone, like you're typing in a text message or an email, and the little suggested words pop up below, and it'll give you sometimes 3 different words. We all know that, right? Yeah. So ChatGPT is sort of essentially that, like on super steroids. What it's done is they've downloaded millions, everything off the internet, millions and millions of things and books and resources. And then it's using that sort of same predictive technology to say, oh, if I see the word the, what commonly follows the word the? And what commonly follows this? So when I ask a question, how big is the earth? It can scour the internet, every resource that's been built into it, and say, what are the most common answers to that? Like, what words start out the sentence and the answer to that? And it starts with the first word, and it'll calculate what's the next word that would be commonly used, most commonly used after that. And it builds an answer based on it's predicting what would be used most commonly in a sentence. That's the simplest way I can make it.
And I think that when it first hopped on my radar a couple of months ago, somebody on Twitter, and I can't even remember who it was, but they posted an article as if it was written by the Gospel Coalition. And ChatGPT was able to scour the language of the Gospel Coalition website and assemble an article on a particular topic as if it was a real Gospel Coalition article. And when I read the article, I was like, this does sound exactly like the Gospel Coalition, because the Gospel Coalition writes in a certain kind of tone, certain kind of a way, and it analyzed a particular current event as if it was Gospel Coalition. And I'm like, this is kind of freaky, because it really did sound like it was written by them. And then that started my mind on possibilities of what could follow from that.
So I could have a whole paper written for maybe a New Testament Pauline literature class or comparative religions. Is this what you're telling me? You can just blink once, and then if it's a yes, blink twice if it's not, because I don't know if my teacher's watching. And so I'm not trying to give nobody no thoughts. But
Well, I guess that's one of my questions to you, Joe, in thinking about education. Yeah. Does this cause you any concerns? Do you think that you're going to change anything in how you interact with students?
It honestly, for me, doesn't change anything that I've already been concerned about in terms of the capacity of students to find new ways to cheat and pass stuff off. I mean, they can buy papers. There's lots of things they could do. It doesn't make it more accessible to some people, because ChatGPT is free, so maybe it makes some things accessible. Let me say this. I think there are some valuable things to it. I don't have a real problem. Like, for example, I wrote a blog post a few weeks ago, and I pasted my post into ChatGPT and said, ChatGPT, give me 5 tweets that summarize this in different ways, including hashtags. It generated in about 2 seconds a bunch of 5 different tweets with hashtags, and that became my social media marketing stuff. And it saved me a lot of effort of doing that, and did a really good job. So yeah, there's some things it does pretty good. And so I do have things that I would be concerned about, but it also has some failures too, in terms of what it can say. It doesn't understand, because it does with common answers, it doesn't give the uncommon answers. So what it made me realize is that when I'm doing assignments and I'm thinking through work, there's a thing in education called Bloom's taxonomy, which basically it's like lower order levels of learning versus higher level orders of learning. And so, for example, remembering something like a verse, memorizing a Bible verse, right? That would be the lowest level of learning. Memorizing an equation or something like that. But then it goes to like understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and then ultimately creating. So as you get higher on the learning expectations, those are things AI has less capacity to do well. It really, when you start to quiz, I've typed in, like, I've done dozens, maybe 100 or so tests with different things. And when you start to do analyze, compare, contrast type of questions, it usually messes up somewhere because it's dealing with popular answers. But especially the Christian field, there's things and subtleties of theology and nuance that really it doesn't do a good job cheating on, because it gives not very specific answers to maybe what my question is. So as a teacher, my goal is, how can I ask questions and make assignments that tend towards those higher levels of Bloom taxonomy, like analyzing, evaluating, creating. So I try to make my assignments fit in those things, and then it's easier to spot when they might try to use an AI.
So basically, you're the professor out here who's blocking all of us from cheating. Or, I mean, not even cheating, I'm sorry, wrong word, but from, taking some of the easier routes when we already have so much on our plate. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. You're welcome. Well, I'll tell you what, Monique, here's the thing. I'm also not like, okay, I teach undergrad. I'm not generally, and I teach students across a wide spectrum of educational backgrounds. So I don't teach only theology students, so I have a lot of students. Some don't write, some are in engineering classes. I was an engineer, so I can pick on engineers. Maybe they don't write so well, or, so I are one of them, so it's all right. Mm-hmm. So there are students that don't. So if I actually had a student that used ChatGPT, I would probably figure it out pretty quickly because it's probably written too well. So I'd probably figure it out pretty quickly because it was actually good writing. So that would be my first tip off.
That actually happened to me when I was a professor in the mid 2000s. I had a couple students I caught cheating, and it was like, because the writing was kind of rough in the introduction, and then all of a sudden it sounded like a graduate student. Yeah. And so all I did was, like, I copied and pasted a couple sentences into Google, and I found immediately what they had copied from and busted them for cheating. Like, you don't want to cheat on your gospel paper. That's not going to.
You guys had Google back then?
It was in 2007. Yes.
Oh, sorry. My bad. My bad. Jeff,
okay. Two real quick things, though. Just to say, there's a couple areas of where you could modify assignments, but also a concern with that too in the education space. So my concern would be more not just students potentially cheating, which is a thing that I think that can be worked around. My actually bigger concern is the use of, like, say, predictive analytics to determine a student's academic future, what will make this student successful, right? So it's like, remember those tests you took in high school? Oh, you should be in this career, that career, and those sort of things. If we relied on AI for those sort of things based on the metrics of what's normative, this student, Jeff Zweerink will never be good at math and science or something like that. But that doesn't allow for students to grow, mature. It's saying students, hey, this is your future based off AI. And if there's authority given to that doesn't allow for humanity to evolve and change and grow as individuals, I'd be really concerned about that if we used it for that sort of thing to, say, oh, you must take this course of education based off this set of predictions and stats and numbers, because we're not a set of stats and numbers, we're human beings. So I think that would be dehumanizing and also lead to disaster. But
you raise
again, just on the education side, I would actually use ChatGPT. I'd find creative ways. Say, hey, go to ChatGPT or some other thing. Use the technology to find some basic information. Ask it for, like I did for the definition of AI. What's the definition of AI? I thought that'd be a fun way to start it. But what they'd have to learn is how to verify the sources and then use that information to synthesize in ways that the AI can't. And so, teaching them to use that as a source potentially to do some things, but also GPT like invents resources. If you ask it, give me 5 sources about, artificial intelligence and the author and books. It'll give it to you, but I've had friends that have done the studies, and they'll literally make up authors or assign the wrong author to the book, because again, it's based off of the consensus of things, and some people write fiction. It doesn't know what it's just, it can end up being a mess. So it does make
That's probably where I would land. Jeff, you were going to say something?
Well, I just, Joe's discussion there about how if you're using it for predictive purposes, one of the things that I've noticed about AI is that what it needs to do is constrain the space where the AI is working, because it tends to not do well out in the extremes. You see that in your self-driving cars, that where everything's flowing smoothly, they do well. When there's a new situation, it doesn't handle well. And so one of the things that you make AI work well is you narrow the parameters where it can go. And so when you're dealing with people, that's saying everybody's kind of got to behave the same, as opposed to somebody may just think very differently. And if AI is the mechanism by which we're evaluating, or the only mechanism, we're going to exclude the value, or that's not the right way to say that. We're going to make it seem like certain people are less valuable because what they are or who they are, their personality, doesn't fit in with that. And so we end up dehumanizing people and elevating the AI, if you will. And I think that's a big concern with AI.
Yeah, I want to talk more about those concerns in a couple minutes, but maybe Jeff, you can comment a little bit on what you're seeing and the research you've done on emerging AI. Like, what do you see as kind of the future? Where is it going? What are some things you see on the horizon?
Well, as Joe mentioned, and as the ChatGPT definition of AI, that there are these areas that seem to be the domain of human intelligence, where we can write creatively, we can make songs, we can do art, we can write computer programs. And so you see AI actually moving out into those arenas. There is AI that you can say, hey, draw me a picture of this scenario, and it will produce some pretty decent looking artwork related to that. Or there's an AI that has composed and recorded and produced a worship song. Now, I thought it was kind of an odd worship song, and I think it's more of a statement on how ordinary or how cookie cutter a lot of worship songs are in the Christian community. But quite honestly, if somebody played this in a church, I'd have been a little bit hard pressed to guess that it was generated by an AI. It kind of fit within a lot of what was there. Computers can write, or AIs can write computer code, which is, again, one of those things that seems to be kind of in the human domain. ChatGPT is in the ability to write. Honestly, I think there's not much that humans do that AI is not going to be able to do at some level. And the question is really, what are we going to allow it to do? Because given the creativity of humans, we're going to figure out how to equip an AI to be able to do virtually anything that we know how to do at some level.
That's my question, because one of my daughters is in journalism, and she and I have had some conversations about this, how will journalists establish themselves when some news outlets can just use AI to write articles? Are we really going to need as many journalists, or how will people have to be creative in order to establish their niche or rise above the AI? And it could become very difficult, very competitive. Publishers could use fewer authors. I mean, we already use ghostwriters quite a bit. I can conceive of, instead of ghostwriting, some percentage of that being done by AI. So to me, that seems to be the trajectory of where we're going. Which, I want to talk about kind of some of the theological implications of that. But before we do that, I also want to raise the issue of law enforcement, Jeff. And I know when we did a conference a couple years ago, when I was still working with you, there was a talk there that was done and considering AI and its impacts on law enforcement. And I think things have developed even since then, but things like facial recognition technology, for example, being used in China, they say that there's 15 cameras for every citizen in China. I mean, there's just cameras everywhere. And they're mandated to have smartphone technology. Couple weeks ago, or a week ago, maybe even, there was deepfake videos where you can take somebody's voice and a picture of them. And I saw this just the other day. A professor entered in a picture of himself and a topic and like a little paragraph discussion, and the AI generated like a 20-minute lecture of this guy talking as if it was a video. It just took his face from a picture and generated a lecture from it. This concerns me in law enforcement contexts, that forging evidence against people could become a real problem. And I had to warn my mother a couple of days ago because my voice is all over the internet, and there's a new scam of taking people's voices and calling the parents, and the child's in distress and is asking for money. I just got in an accident. So I had to warn my mother, like, look, my voice is all over the internet. So if you ever get a call from me that sounds like me asking for money, that's not me. But this makes me think about law enforcement scenarios. And I'm just wondering if you've seen that or if you have concerns about that.
Well, that's the trajectory we're going. The idea, in some sense, that's not new, because Photoshop is a primitive form of doing that, where used to be, if there was a picture of it, that actually existed somewhere. So if you had a photograph, that existed somewhere. Well, now we can take with Photoshop and make pictures of anything. And so we've kind of somewhat learned how to adapt to that, if you will. But what goes on with the video part, I think that is just a whole different level of, we can make things look very different than they are. And I generally think law enforcement's pretty good, but you've got bad apples across the board. I know various law enforcement people I've talked to said, just with the laws out there, you could probably arrest anybody or pull anybody over in a car at any point in time and they're doing something wrong. And so in this scenario now, where if we use AI without a human back there behind it, checking it and being the one who makes the ultimate call, we are going to have a lot of things where people are going to get hurt because we haven't thought carefully about the technology. And your discussion about facial recognition is just a great example of that. I mean, it's great that a criminal who's doing awful things can no longer hide in a crowd, but that means you can no longer hide in a crowd. And if your voice is different than the narrative that people want out there, you now have no place to hide, just because the facial recognition software is that good that's out there, and it's only going to get better. And so these are the sorts of things where, if we don't think carefully, and I would actually make an argument that if we don't think carefully and build character in a Christian context, or as though Christianity were true, we're going to hurt a lot of people in the development of AI, and we're going to miss a lot of the benefits that AI can bring.
This conversation has really given me the Jetsons vibe, like with Rosie the robot. And like thinking about, the potential or the possibility for robots to really take over, and not take over in like the most extreme sense, but to fill the gaps where humans work. Either in like fast food industries or
lower level jobs.
Yeah, maybe some lower level jobs. But as Christians, we believe in the dignity of work. And, if a robot or some artificial intelligence is now stepping in for cheaper wage, to be able to work where a human should work, how do you think that will impact just work in general for humans? And how should Christians be thinking about this in regards to the value and dignity of work overall?
Jeff, why don't you go first since you're on screen, and then we'll let Joe weigh in.
No, I think that's a big problem that we need to think a lot about, particularly because the types of jobs that you can replace tend to be the more automatable ones. And so, yeah, I'm a scientist. I have abilities that allow me to think and do things. But I also know people who are very mechanically good. And so if we're not careful, we're going to be taking the jobs away from people who basically now have nowhere to be a part of what's contributing in society. And, as I look at what Genesis talks about, far before Adam and Eve fell, God had humanity in the garden working, that is part of who we're designed to be. And if we're now taking and making work because of the pressure of money, that it's cheaper to hire the robots, or we no longer need journalists because I can have ChatGPT write these things, or I can have the computer, or I can have the AI write the computer code, or even I don't think it's unreasonable to think at some point in time that we're going to have AIs that can advance the scientific enterprise, that we run the very strong risk of taking a large group of people in our society and making it to where what they can contribute can't compete with what the AI can do because it's cheaper, faster, never gets tired, whatever the reason. And we're now going to have a whole slew of people who don't have meaningful, fulfilling work to do. And that's going to have a dramatic effect on the psyche of people. And I think it's going to lead to crime and all sorts of other things, because people are going to be looking for that thing that work was designed to do. So I think we need to be thinking very carefully about that and making sure that we don't just advance the technology because it's great and it's cheaper and stronger and faster without thinking about, do we have jobs for the people who are around? Because I wholeheartedly believe we are designed to work.
Joe, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say that I guess my concern is there's kind of like maybe two sides to that concern. I don't think it's just necessarily like when we think lower level jobs or whatever. No, I've seen some people say that they've used AI to develop new genetic coding sequences and develop new molecules for stuff. And so some pretty advanced things are done. So it can be used for a lot of that processing. But calculators, in a sense, people said those things about calculators. I'm not saying that there's we need to equivocate on all technology has been, people have been afraid of it and it turns out to be okay. I do think that this is a different kind of something that we should be aware of. But at the same time, I guess it's the old adage when I was a kid growing up, computers, garbage in, garbage out. That's still true. Whatever information is put into it, it will output in a certain way. And the bias of the programmers will come in, whatever that is. And that's actually concerns me on the job side too. Like I said earlier about predictive technology of who should be doing what jobs or who's allowed to do what jobs. Jobs that are replaced that require human consideration, such as I know that right now that AI is used to predict like when medical supplies or food is distributed across the globe for needs. Well, it'll say, okay, distribute so much to Africa or put this much to India or whatever. So if you're using AI for that, well, what are the biases of the programmers? There's certain people, think about your when you have a medical procedure and they say, oh, well, the analytics say that you're too old to get this procedure. The money's, you're not worth that procedure. So my concern about replacing jobs is more that the humanity is lost in the job itself. I mean, at least that's one side of the concerns, that the human decision-making process factors in things that those systems won't be able to factor in, or will be programmed with certain biases against certain human beings or certain groups of human beings that we can't compensate for. And people not knowing that the bias is built in will assume, oh, well, that's just AI. It must be doing the right, morally good thing, right? We assume that because it's remove the emotion and the emotional element, somehow pure reason has led to the right moral end. It's Spock or the Vulcan, sort of thing. Without emotions, we'll get to the right solution. So that's my concern in that whole side is when we give up those jobs, we assume it's making a moral decision. But yeah, I think the other thing we're not getting is that for humans to do the higher order jobs require us to start with the lower entry level jobs. Just like Bloom's taxonomy, students have to learn how to memorize, how to understand before they can move to the higher levels of applying, analyzing, evaluating, and being creative. You don't just start at the higher level jobs. You have to work your way towards those by learning the skills at the lower end jobs. And it reminds me of that movie Wall-E, the little robot thing, and those people are flying off to inhabit a new planet because we destroyed this one. And they're in these, ships that are all controlled by the robots, and they're all fat and in the little things floating around, and they can't even get out of their chairs because they've never moved, right? They can't even press a button because they don't know how. It's just like, the stuff they can't do because they've been so dulled in their capacities by the AI. And so that's the part that's a real problem too. It's not that, we could compensate, we could find other jobs for people to do, but the problem is those certain entry-level jobs are a part of human development of intelligence and capacities and skills. So it's not just like magically, we'll just do the jobs they're not doing. That doesn't understand how humanity itself learns and grows.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this is rooted and grounded in your theological view of humanity. And if you truly believe what the Bible says, that part of the way that God has built the system in us, that he's programmed us from the beginning, that work is connected to our sense of purpose and well-being. We have to truly believe that. And that when people lose the ability to participate in culture building and to participate in building something meaningful and ruling and reigning and governing on God's behalf, that person will become injured. It's injurious to their soul. And that, we're already experiencing unprecedented levels of depression and anxiety, particularly since COVID, when so many people were locked down. Our anthropology, our theology of humanity tells us this is what a human person is. This is what it's designed to do. But if our technology gets to a point where, we're not able to participate according to God's design, we could run into real psychological problems with humanity. So this is something, not to completely scare us about, but that we need to be thinking about in how we're developing the technology. And Jeff, maybe you can comment on this of, any technology, has, well, I shouldn't say any, but many technologies have the potential for good or for evil, depending on the intent of the human heart that utilizes that technology or develops that technology. And so that's all the more important that Christians are involved in this conversation, wouldn't you say?
No, that's absolutely right. And, we tend to have this idea that we can ask, is this good technology or bad technology? And quite honestly, give me any technology and I can find a good use for it or a bad use for it. We don't ask whether a hammer is good or bad. I can go tear down my neighbor's stuff with a hammer, or I can use it to build something that I couldn't if I just had my hands, if you will. And so every technology, and AI is in that class as a technology. The question is, who are we going to be as a people as we use it? Joe listed some of the ways that the biases show up. And even if you were to have a program that didn't have biases built in, all of it is trained on data, and the data is just going to have the inherent biases of the people who generated the data. People have biases. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about in there, and I think we need to be very careful how we do, is do we allow the technology to make decisions, or do we make sure we're using the technology and driving decisions? Because there are going to be lots of pressures to use it in the medical field. It can detect tumors better than many doctors can. But if we allow the AI to decide what's going on without the human oversight, we're now we're going to become victims of the idea that we think the AI is thinking like us, when in reality, it's finding patterns and correlations. And so we need to be making sure that as humans, we're using the AI as a tool, not allowing the tool to form who we become as people. And just as you mentioned, if we don't think that people are valuable, if we don't think that work is valuable, if we don't think that relationships are valuable, more likely than not, the AI is going to diminish the value of people. It's going to diminish the value of work, and it's going to diminish the value of our relationships. And that's going to be pretty catastrophic. So I think it's very important. We're thinking, how are we being formed as people so that we can use this technology well?
So interesting, because what I hear you saying in that is making sure that we keep the first things first, looking at a first ordered way of doing life, and, not putting a machine before a person, not allowing mechanics to dictate our morality, and,
keeping the human level of the decision making is critical.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because for us as believers, there is a way in which our morality is ordered, in which our thinking is ordered. There's a very distinct way in which we do life that machinery, doesn't offer us, one. But then two, I would even say, and this is probably just my skeptical nature, but, even thinking about the people who are creating the machinery, the people who are doing the data and the inputting and all of that, like, what is their worldview? How are they viewing the human person?
Yeah.
And all of that.
Because all of that's going to potentially come through in the programming.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to a question for both of you. And Jeff, you can go first since you're on screen, but do you see any boundaries of like, hey, we should be really careful about, certain issues, certain lines, we don't want to be crossing these boundaries, that you think Christians particularly need to take a strong stand? If you were having like kind of a pastoral perspective, I guess, in talking to regular people about their lives, are there any areas of AI that you think don't participate in it like this? Don't go down this path.
Yeah, as I've thought about that, I've like, I don't see any like, oh, this is out of bounds, or, doing this AI is out of bounds and this AI is in bounds. It's much more, just in the nature of the conversation that we've had here. Do we value work? If this AI is devaluing work, let's pull back and make sure we're doing that well. If this AI is leading to diminished relationships, so that you're relating more to a computer than you are to people, or valuing the AI more than you value people, let's be looking for that and make sure that we don't do that. If we're using AI to make decisions and abdicating our role as decision makers because we are moral agents, the technology isn't. If we're advocating decisions to the AI, those are the sorts of things to look out for. And what my encouragement is to people, especially Christians, is it is really important that we understand our theology well, because very often there are so many different ways this manifests itself that if we have to continually think through every time something comes up, we're going to either be always reacting or just paralyzed. Whereas if we become people who just see what God is doing, who see where God is active, we're going to see where the AI comes in and offers a counterfeit to what God has designed. And so be so familiar with who God is and how he values people and how he values work and how he values creation and how he values our relationship with him, that when we see things that diminish that, we'll recognize it right away. And that gives us the way to go think more deeply about it so that we can figure out how to articulate it well.
That's really good. Very helpful. Joe, I'd love to hear whatever thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, I think what Jeff said earlier is really helpful to think about intrinsic versus instrumental value of things. A shovel has no intrinsic value. It's just all instrumental. How do I use it? If I use it to dig a hole, that's great. If I use it to hit somebody in the head, that's bad. but the shovel has no inherent value of its own. It's how it's used. And AI is really like that. It's not intrinsically evil. It's not intrinsically good. It just is. It's a thing. It's a tool created by humans with our minds and our imagination to help us in certain ways. And it can help or it can harm. So that's just true of anything any human has ever made. So I don't think that there is, like I say, this is off bounds, so to speak. It's more of how is it being used is the factor. And one of the ways I'd say for people to evaluate that is I think, let me put it this way. I think being human is a beautifully inconvenient thing, right? There is not much easy about life with other people. As a pastor years ago, I used to say, my church should be perfect if it wasn't for all these people, right? Problem is, if all the people left, it would still be imperfect because I would be there, So life is inconvenient. It's hard. I see it right now with a lot of my students. We're right now starting to get the COVID. The students who had their last couple of years of high school were COVID lockdowns, right? So they experienced a lot of social isolation, as you mentioned earlier, Krista. They experienced a lot of, do the work on your time and your way. And if somebody got the little sniffles, nobody really cared about whether that was a legit excuse or not. Just everything was bend over backwards to accommodate the odd circumstances that we were living through this pandemic. And so now I see students in the classroom who they haven't socialized properly. They don't know how to interact in the classroom space with other students, with me as a professor. They don't know how to engage with the material and learn it on my timetable as in, hey, this is due then, this is due now. But no, it's like, well, I just had a really rough week and I just needed more time. Like, well, that's great, but that's not a reason to turn in something late. So the idea of even having constraints on their life is very difficult. And I think that may be a warning sign for AI, because when we think of AI, we think, convenience, take out all the drudgery. But then again, like I said, being human is a beautifully inconvenient experience. The difficulty of learning how to relate to different people in different contexts, how to master certain skills or tasks when they are very difficult. Now we'll just do what the convenient thing is because, I can just pass that off to ChatGPT or whoever invents the next thing that surpasses whatever that is, right? And because we are afraid of the inconvenient, the uncomfortable, we'll lose the capacity to relate, to love, to learn, to build societies that can function, that we can deal with the give and take, the ebb and flow of agreement and disagreement, and without becoming. And I think Twitter is, the social media in general. The people get so angry, right? Everything is a reason to be triggered. Why? Because they've dehumanized the process of communication. So I think what we see in social media then becomes the microcosm of what we see in a large scale AI situation. Right. So we see enough precursors in different areas like that, whether through the pandemic or social media, of what can happen and what those warning signs are. So families, when you're playing games at night, sit down and play games, board games with the kids, have dinners, those sort of things. And put the phones in a basket. Don't let them be allowed at the table. Learn to have conversations, make eye contact, communicate. Let there be a space for the technology, but don't let the technology infringe on the other spaces where humanness and humanity matter most.
Wow, that is so good. Such a good reminder for all of us. And gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Please tell us how we can stay in contact with you. Joe, why don't you go first since you're already on the screen?
Finally, I get to go first. Always Jeff. Everyone, so all the stuff I do, it's a variety of places, love it, but it's all sort of coalesced in one place at morethancake.org. morethancake.org. All my social media, my involvements with this lovely Center for Biblical Unity, with RTB. I've got some involvements with them. I work at Grand Canyon University and some of the educational videos that I produce there that people might like on Worldview. So all that is through morethancake.org.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good. And Jeff, why don't you tell people how they can stay connected to you and reasons to believe?
So best way to stay connected with me is at Reasons to Believe. Reasons.org is the website. Lots of articles, lots of stuff to connect with there. You can also follow me on social media. It's RTB_J Zweerink. That's J and then my last name. Those are probably the two best ways to connect up with me.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for being here. This has been fun. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I think you've given people some great things to think about. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. It's been a lot of
Bless
fun.
you all.
All right, we'll see you guys soon. Take care. Wow.
So you got your good AI video. You got your AI episode.
We finally did it.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go to hear from our friends at Birmingham Theological Seminary and Impact 360. We'll be right back in 2 minutes with some final thoughts.
My time with BTS has been a time of theological excellence, but it's also been a time of learning practical personal ministry.
The things that I learned here at BTS, I have implemented them into my ministry.
I was not necessarily planning on getting a seminary degree. I just would choose Birmingham Theological Seminary classes that I was the most interested in, that I thought could help me develop the most. But I ended up getting my MDiv from BTS, and there's so much that I've learned.
I'm really, really indebted to BTS, because without it, I don't think I could have gotten this far. I initially started it because I had been called to a church, had no theological education, but knew I needed it. So between having my first child, doing my first job, and having my first church, BTS came in and just sort of helped me to understand what it meant to be a qualified minister and to be a studied minister that could rightfully divide the word of truth.
It's time to prepare. Let's get ready for the journey ahead. Life doesn't give us a redo. We don't get to run it back. Along the way, we will face obstacles and challenges, but we are carrying light into the dark places. Our paths and our destinations are different, but our beginning is the same. We must prepare. This is why Impact 360 Institute exists. Get ready to grow, to stand firm, to be who God created you to be, to lead with courage, truth, and love. This experience will transform your life. Be challenged to grow your faith. Learn how to think, not what to think. Build community with those seeking to live like Jesus. Establish spiritual rhythms, discover how to be and make disciples. And put your faith into action. As you prepare for the journey ahead, deepen your understanding of what God has revealed about reality and why Christianity is true. Discover your identity in Christ and your God-given calling in authentic community. Cultivate a servant's heart and live a life of spirit-empowered kingdom influence.
So once again, go visit our friends at Impact 360
and Birmingham Theological Seminary.
So it's all new. Artificial intelligence was all new to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard like the words artificial intelligence, but really what it is, what like stands out on the horizon and things like that, it really hasn't been much of an interest to me. I think the China thing with all the like facial recognition and cameras, and I think that's something that's on my radar, but and quite alarming. But
so did you learn anything from this? Was it helpful? Made you think about some things?
Rosie the Robot vibes.
Oh,
yes.
That's what you got out of this.
And I'm glad that my Roomba isn't, artificial intelligence, because I need something to vacuum.
Well, it was interesting to me. And I think that one of the things that I was thinking of at the very end as Jeff was talking is how important it is for Christians to stay involved in this discussion in the public square. Like if people have a young person who's interested in these sorts of things, or any young person for that matter, part of our training and discipleship as parents is teaching them how to interact with technology, how to think about it in a biblical way, not simply to just retreat from culture, but if we want to have a voice in how the technology is developed and used, then Christians need to be involved in that. And that's going to take us as Christian parents, when we see those talents in our kids, to make sure they have that deep theological foundation to build on as they go into their workplace.
So I agree with that. I think, one of the things that I was thinking about was I recently took my nephews to McDonald's, and I don't eat McDonald's. And so I hadn't been in a McDonald's probably in 5 years since I've been home. I had not stepped inside of one. And there was only one person working at their McDonald's. Everything was automated at this particular McDonald's. I don't know if it's a pilot program or what it is, but you plug in, you like push in your order, and then the machines in the back do the things, and they flip the burgers and they fry the nuggets and all this. And then like there's somebody back there to do the oversight. There may have been 2 people, but it wasn't more than 2 for sure. And like you pay with your credit card. There's no like, hey, welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order? It's all just on the machine. And then someone actually walks your little bag to the counter with your number, and your number flashes on the screen, and then you pick it up and you leave. And I was so surprised. So I think that, to your point and to Jeff's point of, and Joe, of making sure that we're not so enthralled with AI and thinking that the morality behind it must be good. This must be good for the environment and for the way that society is quote unquote progressing, that we now eliminate the opportunity for people to work.
And to even have interaction with each other, eye contact and communication. This is part of how God has created us, and what will be the implications, the long-term impacts on us if we eliminate that. It's not simply we ought to engage in this simply because we can't.
Yeah.
The question is should we, and how do we think about us as humans, that we are not just machines.
Yeah.
So,
and cannot easily be replaced by machines.
Yeah.
Should not be easily replaced by machines. All right.
All right. With that,
we'll see you
very soon.
I believe it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
God bless.
Drop.
There is about the